Significant amount of people in the U.S. own a gun. They utilize these weapons to feel safe and comfortable in their own homes. But these weapons make other people feel unsafe and uncomfortable. As a person who owns a gun, I feel it has become very easy for the general public to obtain a firearm, and many of them do not use it properly. This is causing many problems in many of the U.S. neighborhoods. Guns should be restricted in the U.S., and we should make it more difficult for children to obtain them. First, we will talk about this gun safety issue. Second, we will state who is causing this issue. And lastly, we will propose a solution. Okay, so let's begin talking about this issue.
There is a flaw in Americans' gun regulations because the current policy is allowing individuals to obtain and keep guns. Dr. Cendejas states from WordPress.com that, quote, 88 out of 100 Americans have access to guns, and in the last decade, 20% of injuries from gun assaults have increased, end quote. Children are beginning to have access to guns because gun laws have gotten looser and it's becoming easier to obtain automatic weapons. Since children have access to guns, they become interested and curious. An example of this is the Columbine shooting, when 2 young teens got a hold of guns and decided to shoot up their school. 13 people were killed, as well as 21 injured, before the gunmen turned the guns on themselves. History.com agrees by stating that the Columbine massacre was the, quote, worst high school shooting in U.S. history, and promoted a national debate on gun control and school safety, end quote. 2 elder men had provided these guns to the underage teens, therefore proving how anyone is able to get a hold of guns. It is unnecessary to have guns in the United States because the average American does not need assault weapons. According to smartgunlaws.org, they state that, quote, federal law prohibits, with certain exceptions, the possession of handgun or handgun ammunition by any person under the age of 18. Federal law provides no minimum age for the possession of long guns or long gun ammunition, end quote. This is not right because every day in the United States, guns cause the death of 18 people under the age of 25. This policy is doing more harm than good because anyone can get a hold of guns. And smartgunlaws.org also states that, quote, firearms were used in 44% of suicide deaths among people under the age of 25 in 2010, end quote. Who is to blame for this?
The National Rifle Association, also known as the NRA, is to blame for all this commotion. They are the people who persuade us to use guns by stating we need them for safety reasons. But the safety of the children are at risk. Even though the NRA provides programs for gun safety, there is no way a child can contain their curiosity to hold and play with a gun when it is left unattended. For example, according to USA Today, quote, in an experiment in which researchers observed how 8 to 12-year-old boys behaved when in the room left unattended with a hidden gun, 75% of the boys found the gun within 15 minutes. Only one of the 64 kids in the experiment left the room to notify an adult, end quote. This is a high percentage of children that did not notify an adult about the gun in the room. If the NRA did more to prevent children from ever being in contact with the gun, there would be less accidents caused by misuse of a firearm. The NRA takes advantage of the Second Amendment, which states the right to bear arms. We have an excess amount of firearms, which is not necessary when only for safety purposes. The structure of the NRA is really flawed. It does little to prevent children from exposure to weapons, such as in Texas and Arizona, where guns are everywhere. These states show children it is okay to use guns. This is the NRA in action to expose guns as a safe weapon while they are a dangerous piece of machinery. The NRA is the problem in our fight towards safety for citizens of the world. The NRA does not comply with our government's rules to lock up guns and only store 1 gun per household for safety purposes. But the NRA does all it can to never let the government restrict their gun use. For example, in Texas, the NRA helped promote pro-choice, which allows parents to do whatever they wish with the guns in their possession. Most people in Texas allow extreme exposure of guns in school and at home. People who allow children to use guns can result in shootings, such as in the Columbine shooting where a child got a hold of his dad's gun. What can we do to fix
Put
this
an end to
national
reckless gun control, we propose a change of policy. Instead of arguing against the public and demanding owners to completely abandon their firearms and lose their sense of security, we feel a change in the process of obtaining a gun is in order. More specifically, we feel the need for greater gun prerequisites. Prerequisites that will limit the acquisition of guns solely to those who are highly qualified and strictly trained to handle such weapons. First, we would enforce stricter background checks, which according to Johns Hopkins University poll, 89% of Americans favor a background check as opposed to complete restriction of firearms. In an effort to limit the handover of guns to just anyone, background checks would ensure that weapons aren't being distributed to ex-convicts or felons who might misuse firearms. But also, we would look into the person's personal record, their schooling, their armed service reputation, anything. We would look to ensure that the person is not a threat to others or themselves. Second, we would strive to extend the legal age to obtain firearms from 18 years to 21 years of age. There is no need to have adolescents on the streets with firearms in hand. And thirdly, we would enforce the requirement of a gun license. Currently in California, no gun permit or license is required, except for the passing of a gun safety test, which is not enough to hand over a gun to a person. We need to have the public properly trained to handle firearms and know the damage such weapons could cause. We don't need people buying guns simply because they're, quote, cool looking. These prerequisites would greatly reduce the number of firearm owners, and although there are illegal means of obtaining a gun, with this we can limit the spread of guns by unlawful means.
As you can see, guns are very dangerous and make people feel very uncomfortable and unsafe. It is very easy for any person to obtain firearms here in the United States. Now, to retract our main points, first, we talked about the gun safety issue and how children can easily obtain these firearms and cause harm. Second, we explained how the National Rifle Association is causing this issue and allowing it to further continue. And lastly, we provided a solution to create gun prerequisites. With all this in mind, we would like to conclude and state that gun laws should be restricted and many people do not use them properly. It is up to us to make a change and not oppose gun control.